Salve to Discipuli, this is McGeester Buddy with the Stage 15 lesson on relative pronouns and clauses. First, a couple of relative pronoun rules. A relative pronoun introduces more information about another noun in the sentence. The relative pronoun will match its antecedent, meaning the noun that it's referring to, in number and gender, not necessarily case, because it will have its own function within the relative clause. It has the same case functions as nouns, and we'll talk more about that later. The relative pronoun begins the clause, unless it's in a prep phrase, and we'll see an example of that. The verb ends the clause. All right, here is the chart. Take some time to memorize this chart. The better you know this chart, the easier your life will be. Notice that the order is in the same as adjectives, so masculine, feminine, neuter. This is also oftentimes referred to as the qui, qui, quad chart. Cui, quibus, and quibus are the same for all three genders, so it's just listed once here. You may list it all three times when you're practicing it. Take some time to recognize some similarities to the adjective charts that we already know. For example, em is similar to the accusative singular in the third declension. Am is the accusative singular in the first declension. O, ah, and o, this is the same as in the second and first declension, second declension. E and I, the same as in the second and first declension. Ibus, ibus, this is the same as in the third declension. And then we've got os and as, same as in the second declension, first declension. Notice that we've got our neuter rules, so quad, quad. Neuter's the same in the nominative and accusative. Qui, qui, same in the nominative and the accusative, though it doesn't just end in a here. So once you do that, you'll realize that this chart actually isn't quite so far off from stuff that we already know. All right, so case functions. Here are some examples of relative clauses in English. Okay, so the kid is best is our main clause. Who has a hat is giving us more information about a noun in the main clause. The who is referring to the kid. Here, who is the subject of the relative clause. The kid who has a hat is best. The kid is doing, the who, which refers to the kid, is doing the having. The kid to whom I gave a hat is best. So the kid is best is still our main clause. I is the subject here. Gave is the verb. Hat is the direct object. To whom is the indirect object here. So it'll be dative in Latin. All right, the kid is best is still our main clause. The kid whom the hat covers is best. So here the hat is the subject. Covers is the verb. Whom is the direct object, because it's what's being covered by the hat. All right, last example, the kid is best is still our main clause here. On whom the hat rests is our relative clause. On whom is a prep phrase, and in Latin that will be in the ablative. All right, let's go ahead and do some practice sentences. Copy down these 6 sentences. Bracket your relative clause. Underline all of your modifiers and draw arrows to their antecedents. Put parentheses around prep phrases, mark all other words, and translate. All right, so our first sentence, we've got a relative pronoun here, and it ends with a verb. Let's look at the relative pronoun. Qui is referring to senex. Remember, the antecedent of the relative pronoun will always be outside of the relative clause. It'll always be the main clause. But both of these are nominative. Both of these are masculine. Both of them are singular. The fact that both of them are nominative is coincidental, and that's because here qui is the subject of the relative clause, and senex is the subject of the main clause. But what's important is that they are both masculine and they are both singular. So the main clause is the old man was King Cogidubnus. The relative clause is who was holding the scepter. So the old man who was holding the scepter was King Cogidubnus. All right, we've got quem to ducabat. That's our relative clause. Quem is referring to Agnes. They are both accusative. They are both singular, they are both masculine. Quem is accusative, so it's going to be the direct object in the relative clause. Servus, nominative, so subject, and this is our verb. Agnus is nominative, so it's our subject. And then we have a subject complement and a linking verb. So the lamb was the victim. That's our main clause. Which the slave was leading is our relative clause. So let's put the two together. The lamb which the slave was leading was the victim. All right, donum quod regem maxime delectavit erat equus. Quad is our relative pronoun. It's referring to donum. Both of these are neuter. Both of them are singular. Donum is the subject. Erat, the linking verb. Equus is a subject complement. So our main clause says the gift was a horse. Now let's look at our relative clause. Quad is the subject here. Regem, accusative direct object. Adverb, verb. So, which greatly pleased the king. Now let's put it together. The gift, which greatly pleased the king, was a horse. All right, venum quod anculae ferebant erat in patera aurea. In patera aurea is a prep phrase, and aurea is modifying patera. That's how I knew to include it in the prep phrase. Quad is referring to venum, nominative subject, but here quad, unlike up here quad is the direct object, and the reason that I knew is because anculae has to be the subject. Ferebant is plural, so it needs a plural subject. Quad would be singular, so quad could not be the subject of ferebant. All right, let's do our main clause first. The wine was in the gold bowl. Let's do the relative clause next, which the slave girls were carrying. Now let's put it together. The wine, which the slave girls were carrying, was in the gold bowl. All right, we've got quam through tenebat for our relative clause. Quam is referring to victima. They are both feminine. They are both singular. Victima is nominative, so it's our subject, and this is our verb. Let's do the main clause first. So the victim bleeded. Quam is accusative direct object, servus nominative subject, and our verb, so which the slave was holding. Let's put it together. The victim, which the slave was holding, bleeded. All right, via in qua stabant pulcherrima erat. This is an example of where our relative clause doesn't start with the relative pronoun. It's because it's in a prep phrase. So in which is what starts our relative clause. The in which, our prep phrase, is referring to the street. Pulcherrima is an adjective referring all the way back over to via. So let's look at the main clause first. We've got our nominative subject. We have a linking verb. The street was very beautiful. In which they were standing is our relative clause. So the street in which they were standing was very beautiful. All right, Discipuli, remember a relative clause is giving more information about a noun in the main clause. The relative pronoun will match its antecedent, which will be outside of the relative clause in number and gender. The pronoun will have its own function or its own case within the relative clause. The pronoun uses the same case purposes as nouns. The pronoun begins the clause, unless it's in a prep phrase. Think of that last example we did. And the verb ends the clause. Vale to Discipuli.